Do you know the difference between someone who genuinely transforms their life and someone who lives trapped in a painful loop of starting strong, making big promises, and surrendering just a few days later? It is not a lack of willpower, nor is it a missing spark of motivation. And it certainly is not a defect in your intelligence or character. It is something far deeper that standard productivity advice completely ignores, because most people try to rebuild their entire existence from the outside in, starting with the roof long before they have ever poured a single drop of concrete for the foundation. Consider the person who makes the exact same declaration every year on the 1st of January, promising that this will finally be the season everything changes. They sign up for an expensive gym membership, buy a fresh stack of self-help books, download 6 different productivity tools, start an impossibly strict diet, and then, by the time March arrives, they find themselves standing in the exact same spot they started from, carrying an added weight of silent shame. They fail not because they are weak, but because they are trying to force a massive external shift without understanding the underlying mechanics of how human habits actually work. I want to tell you the story of a young man named Leo. Leo was 22 years old, and his life was quietly slipping through his fingers without him even realizing the extent of the damage. He was not a malicious person, he was not unintelligent, and he was not naturally lazy, but he was doing what millions of people do every single day, which is existing entirely on passive autopilot. His days were consumed by modern digital noise, endless late-night scrolling, cheap quick-fix entertainment, irregular sleep, and a total lack of long-term vision. As long as the real world was not demanding immediate answers from him, living this way felt manageable, even comfortable. But reality has a ruthless way of knocking on your door when you least expect it. And when it finally came knocking for Leo, it did not knock politely. It knocked the door completely off its hinges. Within a span of 2 weeks, the flimsy safety net holding Leo's routine together snapped. He failed a critical certification exam he needed to secure a stable job. His family faced an unexpected financial crisis that put immediate pressure on household expenses, and he looked at his bank balance only to realize he had 0 savings to offer as help. The sudden realization hit him like a physical blow to the chest, revealing that the young man who spent his mornings sleeping until noon and his evenings consuming mind-numbing content was now expected to step up and handle real responsibilities. In a moment of sheer panic and desperation, Leo did what almost everyone does when faced with a crisis. He sat down with a clean notebook and created an aggressive, completely unrealistic overhaul plan. He decided that starting the very next morning, he would wake up at 5 o'clock, run 5 miles, study difficult technical material for 6 straight hours, cut out all junk food, stop using social media entirely, and become an entirely different human being overnight. Do you know how long that ambitious transformation plan lasted? It lasted less than 72 hours. By the 3rd morning, when his alarm went off in the freezing dark, his mind actively fought against him. When he finally forced himself to sit down at his desk, he found that he could not maintain focus for more than 5 minutes at a time. His brain, deeply accustomed to continuous high dopamine stimulation, felt suffocated by the quiet stillness of deep work. His body, completely unconditioned for intense daily exertion, felt heavy and broken. He discovered, in the most painful way possible, that he possessed no internal architecture, no behavioral safety net, and no functional framework to rely on when sheer emotion wore off. What you are going to discover through Leo's journey goes directly against the loud culture of rapid overnight fixes and extreme 90-day challenges. Real transformation is never born out of desperate, aggressive force. It is built on a structured system that fuses ancient behavioral wisdom with the modern principles of neuroplasticity. Before Leo could fix his financial situation, rebuild his focus, or support his family, he had to stop trying to drive a high-performance vehicle when he did not even know how to navigate the basics of his own mind. He stumbled across the first cornerstone of his eventual recovery late one night while scrolling aimlessly online, coming across a concept that shifted his entire perspective on growth. It was the Japanese philosophy of Kaizen, the art of continuous, micro-level improvement of just 1% every single day. The core truth behind Kaizen is as disarming as it is powerful. The human brain is hardwired to resist sudden, massive shifts because rapid change triggers an automatic threat response, causing you to retreat directly back into comfortable, familiar patterns. But when a change is made so microscopic, so ridiculously small that it creates zero internal resistance, the brain does not trigger that alarm system. Leo learned that trying to change his life overnight was like attempting to leap over a mountain in a single jump, whereas Kaizen was about stepping onto a single, tiny stone. Alongside Kaizen, he encountered the concept of Keystone Habits as popularized by researchers and writers like James Clear in Atomic Habits, which demonstrates that certain foundational behaviors act like the prime domino in a long chain, naturally driving other positive routines into place without friction. Realizing that his massive 6-hour daily study plan was a complete fantasy, Leo made a decision that felt almost embarrassingly small. He promised himself that he would do just one simple thing every single evening before bed. Open his study guide and read exactly 2 pages, not 20 pages, not a full chapter, just 2 pages. If he wanted to read more, he could, but his only absolute obligation was 2 pages. To his internal ego, reading 2 pages felt meaningless, like it would never produce any real results in time to solve his mountain of problems. But Leo was beginning to learn a truth that separates those who succeed from those who stay stuck forever. Possible, consistent action will always be vastly more powerful than an unsustainable promise of perfection. By shrinking the barrier to entry down to something completely undeniable, Leo took his first real step toward rewiring his self-image. He was no longer focusing on the giant, terrifying goal of fixing his entire life in a month. Instead, he was focusing on building the daily, unshakable habit of simply showing up, laying down the very first brick of a structural system that would eventually change everything he thought he knew about discipline, purpose, and long-term success. Night after night, Leo opened his guide and read his 2 pages. On the first few evenings, the action felt almost ridiculous, a tiny drop of effort in an ocean of overwhelming responsibilities. But something subtle and deep began to happen inside his mind. For the first time in years, he was keeping a daily promise to himself. He was breaking the chronic cycle of self-betrayal that had quietly defined his entire adulthood. By the 10th night, reading those 2 pages no longer required willpower. It had become an automatic anchor at the end of his day. Sensing the quiet momentum building, Leo decided to apply the same principle of micro-progression to his physical body. Remembering his past failed attempt to run 5 miles in the dark, he stripped away all performance pressure and established a new physical keystone habit. Put on his shoes every morning, step outside the front door, and walk for just 5 minutes. It was during these quiet morning walks that Leo began to internalize another crucial principle, the ancient practice of Shoshin, or the beginner's mind. Shoshin is the deliberate practice of approaching life, learning, and self-improvement with total humility, curiosity, and freedom from rigid expectations. For years, Leo had been trapped by an all-or-nothing mindset, believing that if he could not perform a task perfectly or operate like a flawless high achiever, he had failed entirely. Shoshin allowed him to drop the heavy burden of pretense and accept exactly where he was starting from. He was no longer trying to look like an expert or prove anything to the world. He was simply a student observing his own progress, willing to be clumsy, willing to start small, and willing to learn without judgment. As the weeks turned into months, the compounding effect of these microscopic habits began to reshape Leo's reality. 5 minutes of morning walking naturally expanded into 20 minutes, which eventually turned into light running. Reading 2 pages a night expanded into finishing full books on technical skills and practical finance. His improved physical stamina restored his mental clarity, allowing him to sit at his desk and focus for solid 30-minute blocks without feeling an overwhelming urge to check his phone for cheap dopamine. He applied for an entry-level position at a local logistics company, securing a humble job that allowed him to contribute directly to his family's living expenses. For the first time in his life, Leo felt a genuine sense of control and self-respect. His new identity as a disciplined, reliable individual was taking root. Then, life dealt him a sudden and devastating blow. Just as Leo was building a stable rhythm, a severe storm of unexpected hardship hit his family. His mother suffered a major health complication that required immediate, round-the-clock home care, and the financial burden on the household doubled overnight. To make ends meet, Leo was forced to take on double shifts at work, pushing his daily manual labor to over 12 grueling hours. The fragile environment he had so carefully crafted completely collapsed under the sheer weight of exhaustion and stress. Within 2 weeks, his carefully constructed routines evaporated. Exhausted, drained, and emotionally overwhelmed, he stopped running in the morning. He stopped reading at night. He began relying on processed fast food for quick energy and picked up his old habit of late-night scrolling to numb the constant anxiety running through his head. The internal voice of shame returned with terrifying force, whispering that he was a fraud, that his months of progress had been an illusion, and that he was destined to remain stuck in his old patterns forever. Lying in bed at 2 a.m. after an exhausting shift, staring at the ceiling with a heavy chest, Leo hit what felt like absolute rock bottom. He was convinced he was back at square one. In his desperation, he revisited the notes he had taken on mindset philosophies and came across a concept that saved him from falling completely back into despair. Wabi-Sabi, the traditional Japanese philosophy that finds profound beauty in imperfection, transience, and incompleteness. Wabi-Sabi challenged everything the toxic modern self-help culture had taught him about progress. It reminded him that a meaningful life is not a straight, unbroken line of flawless victory, but a textured canvas shaped by cracks, repairs, and unexpected storms. The cracks in his routine were not proof of failure. They were a natural part of the human experience. Progress, he realized, was not linear. It was a spiral. Even when you fall back into familiar territory, you do so with a deeper level of self-awareness, experience, and wisdom than you had before. Alongside Wabi-Sabi, he embraced the mindset of Gaman, the art of enduring hardship and unexpected suffering with quiet dignity, patience, and internal grace. Gaman is the quiet internal system that takes over when the external environment falls apart. It taught Leo that true strength is not about never feeling overwhelmed or exhausted. It is about holding yourself together with self-compassion while navigating the storm. Armed with these twin realizations, Leo stopped hating himself for the setback. He understood that he did not need to fix everything at once, nor did he need to jump immediately back into his peak routine while working double shifts. He simply needed to apply the principle of Shuhari, the 3 stages of mastery. Follow the rules, adapt the rules, and transcend the rules. He was in a temporary survival phase, which meant he needed to adapt the rules to fit his current reality without abandoning his core identity. Instead of demanding 2 hours of intense study and long workouts from his exhausted mind and body, Leo executed the 2-minute return rule. He stripped his habits back down to their bare, microscopic foundations. Before falling asleep, no matter how tired he was from his shift, he opened his book and read just 1 single sentence. When he woke up, he stepped outside his front door, took 3 deep breaths of fresh air, and stepped back inside. To an outsider, these tiny actions looked utterly insignificant, but psychologically, they were revolutionary. By doing them, Leo kept the thread of his identity intact. He proved to his subconscious mind that the chain was not broken, that he had not abandoned himself, and that a setback is merely a temporary pause, not the end of the story. He was no longer a victim of his circumstances. He was a resilient architect, learning how to rebuild his life even in the middle of the storm. Rebuilding from those microscopic daily actions, Leo entered the final and most transformative phase of his journey. The storm of his family's crisis eventually settled into a manageable routine, but the man who emerged from that period was fundamentally different from the boy who had panicked months earlier. As his schedules stabilized, he expanded his habits once again, not out of desperate pressure, but out of a deep, quiet alignment with who he was becoming. It was during this period of steady consolidation that Leo discovered the 7th critical framework of his transformation, the concept of Ikigai, the intersection of what you love, what you are good at, what the world needs, and what you can be sustained by. For years, Leo had assumed that purpose was something grand and magical that suddenly struck a person from the sky, like lightning. He believed he needed to discover a world-changing passion before he could start living with intention. But through the lens of true Ikigai, he realized that purpose is not found. It is constructed through daily engagement. His purpose was not tied to a glamorous title or sudden fame. It was rooted in being a solid, unwavering pillar for his family, a reliable professional at his workplace, and a conscious master of his own time and mind. When he reoriented his morning routine and evening study toward this grounded sense of duty and self-respect, the internal friction that used to make daily tasks feel like unbearable chores completely dissolved. He was no longer trying to force himself to study or exercise out of self-hatred or fear of failure. He was engaging in those behaviors because that is simply what a reliable, intentional person does. This profound identity shift was complemented by the 8th and final concept, Ichigo Ichie, the ancient realization that every single moment, interaction, and experience occurs only once in a lifetime and can never be truly repeated. In his past life, Leo had spent almost every waking moment either regretting his past mistakes or worrying endlessly about his uncertain future, completely absent from the present reality. Ichigo Ichie transformed his daily routine from a set of mechanical tasks into a series of rich, intentional rituals. When he sat down at his desk for 30 minutes of focused study, he brought his entire presence to those 30 minutes, treating that focus as a unique, unrepeatable opportunity. When he went for his morning run, he was fully aware of his feet striking the ground, the cold air in his lungs, and the quiet sunrise. Repetition stopped feeling like boring monotony and began feeling like a deeply rewarding practice of living fully. 3 years after the night, he sat in his bedroom staring at a blank notebook in sheer panic. Leo's life bore no resemblance to his past self. He had completed his professional certifications, earned a major promotion at work that permanently secured his family's financial stability, built a strong, healthy, physical foundation, and developed a quiet, unshakable mental clarity. But the most remarkable part of his evolution was not his external achievements. It was the total absence of internal struggle. He no longer needed complex motivational speeches, extreme willpower challenges, or aggressive social media accountability to get out of bed, focus on deep work, or take care of his health. His habits had become as natural and effortless as breathing because they were no longer external targets he was chasing. They were the direct reflection of his underlying identity. One afternoon, a younger colleague at work named Sam approached Leo after noticing his steady focus, calm demeanor, and consistent work ethic. Sam was 21, visibly stressed, overwhelmed by constant distractions, and struggling to manage his responsibilities. He asked Leo the same question people always ask when they see someone operating at a high level. How do you force yourself to be so disciplined every day, and how do you never run out of motivation? Leo smiled, remembering the young man he used to be, sleeping until noon and trying to fix his entire life in a single 72-hour burst of frantic energy. He looked at Sam and told him that motivation was a fleeting emotion that disappears the moment things get difficult, and that relying on raw willpower was like trying to run a marathon on a broken leg. He explained that true change does not come from trying to build a dramatic, perfect life overnight. He shared the story of the 2 pages, the 5-minute walk, the wisdom of small steps, the courage to be a beginner, the grace of accepting bad days, and the power of building a system so small that your brain has no reason to resist it. He gave Sam a challenge, the exact same framework that had saved his own life 3 years prior. Pick one microscopic habit, something so small it feels almost absurd, and commit to doing strictly that one thing every day for 14 days. Do not try to change your diet. Do not try to fix your sleep schedule all at once. Do not try to overhaul your whole world. Just keep one tiny promise to yourself for 2 full weeks. Prove to your subconscious mind that you are capable of consistency, and watch how that single quiet victory begins to rewrite everything you believe about your own potential. Now, consider your own life and the exact position you are standing in right now. You do not need a dramatic 90-day transformation. You do not need an extreme routine that burns you out by next week. And you certainly do not need to wait for a special date on the calendar to begin. Time is going to pass. regardless of what you choose to do today. 3 years from now, a new version of you will exist, living with the consequences of the choices you make in this exact moment. The only question that truly matters is whether that future version of you will still be trapped in the exact same frustrating cycle of big promises and sudden surrenders, or whether you will look back at today as the quiet, unassuming moment you finally decided to lay down the first real brick of a new foundation. Choose your microscopic action right now. Make it small, make it possible, and step onto the path. You do not need to be perfect. You simply need to begin. Show up and keep the promise.